The context is the same, context of war at the door of the EU in Ukraine against Russia, an energy transition that is very significant, and the unpleasant side of it, which is aviation bashing. And the Bourget Air Show is a good response to that. And the supply chain that has a certain number of difficulties, recruiting people, and the ability to supply, face inflation, the drift of the energy prices, which is creating quite a number of problems in deliveries. So India has announced the acquisition and future negotiations on 26 aircraft for the Indian Navy. This contract will be negotiated between the two governments as it was the case for the Indian Air Force. It's a great satisfaction for the company, for our partners, Thales, Safran, and all the 500 companies contributing to build the Rafale, and especially the Navy Rafale. The military programming law, this law was voted. If there was no such law, we wouldn't have a plan going from 2024 to 2030. In 2027, there would be an event. It would question a certain number of things, but it is important to have this military programming law as done with 413 billions of euros, including the 13 from the exceptional earnings to be still won. So we are in this rationale of the military programming law with objectives to finalize the order for health to have Rafales for the Air Force. We said 137 in 2030 added to the 41 from the Navy. So here we are delivering the Rafales of the fourth tranche, the second part, and we will deliver the fifth tranche that has been ordered. The developments are being pursued with the standard F4. We're preparing the standard F5 with future work on UAVs, the beginning of the FCAS. We have installed a platform here in Saint-Cloud. We have engineers from Germany and Spain who will join us, and they will prepare this combat demonstrator. We're in phase 1B. We will have a phase 2 that will have to be contractualized before a first flight in 2029. We're also working to deliver the retrofits of ATL2, the maritime patrol that has to fit standard 6. We're working on maritime surveillance aircraft, and in this law, we have 12 aircraft that will have to be delivered. 5 are under condition, and the Albatros with ATEX. So all this has been clearly identified in the LPM. The air show, just a few words to say that it was a real success, the success of the Rafale, of course. All our delegations, all the Falcon users in the world went to the air show, visited it, and said that they wanted to meet the French authorities and they wanted to meet us too. A lot of delegations that are still not equipped with the Rafale. We could meet them, therefore. Great attraction for our Falcon aircraft, especially a new attraction for the 6X, because the 6S is in flight and on the ground. You can see it in flight, and you can also see it, visit the cabin with its internal design, the mock-up of the 10X, which is very popular, and all this can help us prepare for the future. And the Bourget Air Show was a place where we could talk about this. Now, as for decarbonization, as you saw it in the film SAF, business jets are ahead of commercial aircraft in terms of SAF, because we're using a lot of our fuels with this aviation fuel, sustainable aviation fuel. Recruitment operations, which are highly specific because we need to recruit and hire more people. We'll talk about this later on. And we set up the Avion des Métiers. It was set up by the GIFAS. And we want young people to join Dassault. There was a small office next to our stand. we received 500 applications, and we are working on them to help us hire people because we have a lot of tension in terms of employment. Now, our activities and programs in Greece, we delivered 2 new aircraft and 4 pre-owned Rafale. These are aircraft from the French Air Force. They have been transformed. They are as good as new. We have pursued our prospection. We are holding discussions with some countries. One of them is going to come true, 26 for the Indian Navy. As for France, we've delivered 2 Rafale, and we are continuing the development of our standards. As for the Future Combat Air System, FCAS, we have a physical platform here in Saint-Cloud. We've begun by setting up the common tools that will allow us to work in proper industrial teams. And the study has begun. It's pursuing all the studies we had begun in phase 1A. Now, the mission aircraft, the program is taking place normally for the maritime surveillance planes, Archange. We've delivered the 7th aircraft for ATL-2, which has been upgraded. And we're working, as I told you last March, we're working on a project, Future Maritime Patrol Aircraft, based on the Falcon 10X. As for exports, for Falcons, we have delivered the first of the 4 Falcons ordered last year from Korea, an aircraft for electronic war. As for the Falcon context, at the end of 2022, things had slowed down. We had a very good 22 in terms of sales, with 64 orders taken. Now it is slightly slower since the beginning of the year. 12 orders have been received in the first half. And in the meantime, we have delivered 9 aircraft in H1 2023. As for the Falcon 6X, the first point is that we're waiting for its certification. It will probably take place this summer. We are continuing the development of the Falcon 10X, and we're continuing improving the Falcons in service. We've validated a new cockpit, EZ4, that will be proposed on the 7X and the 8X. We also have new modules available on our Falcons that we have installed and which is proposed on Falcon 6X and will be proposed on the Falcon 10X also. As for aviation bashing, as I told you earlier on, I'd like to repeat, and you will hear me repeat this, 2% of CO2 emissions for global aviation, 2% for business jets, that is 0.04% of global CO2 emissions. This is what we're talking about. We are committed, as I said in the small film, to reach carbon neutrality by 2050, considering the obligations we've all taken. A year's use of all our Falcons, that's roughly 2,000 Falcons, that is roughly 24 hours of global video streaming, 5 hours of global HGV traffic, or 2.5 days of German power plant operation. So that is to give you the perspective and show you how much business aviation costs in terms of CO2 emissions. And we were a bit surprised that commercial aviation has been excluded from the green taxonomy determined in Brussels. They've only taken into account commercial aviation. When we had engaged the decarbonization of the sector, because we use SAF, it's not just us, it's the entire commercial aviation in the world. Our major competitors in the US, in Canada, in the United States, or in Brazil are doing just as us, and they're quite fast. They're going to use SAF. We're organizing ourselves in Europe and in France. We've held meetings with the President of the Republic to develop SAF lines, and we're using our SAF in-house at Dassault. We're really engaged in this decarbonization. So, seen from us, this green taxonomy, well, we don't understand why we are excluded from it in Europe. And we will prepare a legal recourse to understand. We'll take legal action to understand why we're not part of this taxonomy. It can handicap some of our subcontractors, especially SMEs in France. But in general, if I compare the United States and France, the United States are going very fast in decarbonization with incentive systems. And Europe is using a hyper-regulation mode. And this is something we'd like to denounce because we don't see inefficiency in this hyper-regulation. And this is not just limited to the aeronautical industry, but there are other industries that are highly affected by this hyper-regulation. And we were all very happy to hear the President say that there are enough regulations and we have to try to be more efficient and more pragmatic rather than trying to always prepare texts and standards. As for the SAF, we are still doing research and technology in the framework of our companies. We have aerodynamical formulae. We're working on the mass and engine performance, and the future aerodynamic performance of an aircraft can be improved. We're working with those who are manufacturing the engines, and we want to be more sober with our engines, consume less. So if we have SAF and we consume less, we are on the right track. And we have to optimize our air operations. Our clients, users, pilots can fly along traffic lines that don't consume a lot of fuel. They have the freedom to choose if they want to use more kerosene or less, or use more SAF or less. It's up to them to decide. And we have decided to buy forests, to reforest, to plant more trees and store the CO2 emissions. As for the 6X, we're waiting for certification. It's a question of a few days. We hope that it will happen this summer. There are always a few minutes before we sign all kinds of papers. When we have to deliver, we have to study these papers. And this is the moment that is the most important. And we've been waiting for this for quite a number of weeks now. And at the same time, we are ramping up with the 6X, and as soon as we'll have received a certification, we will commission this aircraft and we will begin deliveries to our first clients, and there'll be a demonstrator. And the future clients will be able to assess the 6X in flight, and this will definitely boost the sales of 6X. Falcon 10X, we are pursuing our work. We are very careful about the development of the engine. This engine exists. It equips the Gulfstream, but we're adapting it to our 10X Falcon with greater thrust, and we are continuing this development with great attention, and the results are very good. So we're quite confident about this engine, and this is very important for an aircraft, especially considering what we have seen in the past. We're working on the cabin, the modularity of the cabin, the new size of the cabin. We can imagine all kinds of new things, and the other technological aspect is the carbon wings, and we're ready to develop the wing service and the production of this wing service. The first series, you see the pictures here from Biarritz, and they are at Martignac before they go to Mérignac. Human resources, this is very important. Last year we recruited a lot. This year also we're going to hire a lot of people, 1,400 employees in the group, 1,000 in France. It's quite a large number. It's not very easy to find them. We were quite attractive at Dassault, but we can't find them quick enough. So we're trying to find them everywhere, apprentices, engineers, and our workload is quite heavy. with the ramping up in the design offices and all the ad hoc services to make our aircraft fly. We need a lot of people. The sharing of the value in France. So there was an agreement between the trade unions and the MEDEF at the beginning of the year. We at Dassault Aviation, we have this profit sharing, this participation, and in 2023, it will represent 4 months of wages. So this is the right thing to do, and we're right at the top in terms of value sharing. We've signed agreements with the trade union organizations this year in terms of their wages. We've increased their wages, although some say don't fuel inflation by increasing the wages too much, but inflation was quite high, so therefore the average increase was 6.2%. This agreement was signed by the CGC, CFDT, and the UNSA. So a few agreements on disabilities, disabled people to improve the situation of some of the future employees. One of the major topics is the deployment of the new job typology in the metallurgy branch. This will have to be there in all the metallurgy branches right from the 1st of January 2024, whether it's in the large companies or small companies. This is very important because we have to requalify each job and put each employee in each box in each job. So this is a major job which is underway, and we are quite confident about the time. We're also discussing with the trade unions to obtain an agreement on the methodology and to properly label these jobs.
So business result 1.6 billion order intake for this first half with 12 Falcons, but also some additions regarding our pricing revision on the export market. Sales 2.3 billion, 9 Falcons, 2 exported Rafales, new, the 2 French Rafales, and 4 pre-owned Rafales from the French defense. So that's 3/3, so 1/3 for export, a small third for French defense forces, and another third for the Falcons. The backlog is now standing at 34.4 billion euros, excluding the 26 aircrafts planned for the Indian Army. Without the Indonesian Army, and we're waiting for the first installment for the first 18 aircraft out of the 36 to be delivered, and we're still waiting for an order intake of 42 aircraft for France, so our backlog should increase by the end of this year. Now, adjusted consolidated income statement, 151 operating income, 2,295 million for the net sales. We have financial income which went up. Our cash has helped us to invest in instruments with a higher earning. The role of Thales and other equity affiliates, 210 million. Taxes, 66 million, so a net income 405 million euros, a net income margin of 17.6%. Self-financing is still high because our sales are a bit lower in this first half, so that's 10.8% for self-finance. So we still have the 6X and 10X, and we are still working on the nitty-gritty of the 10X. So that's all from me for this first half year results. Now I'm waiting for your questions.